Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly realized your entire life has been shaped by the way you see yourself? Not what others see, not what they say, but the quiet image you hold of yourself in your own mind. It's strange, isn't it? The world keeps telling us to dream big, think positive, stay confident, yet most people live their entire lives trapped behind invisible walls they built inside their own head. Today's story begins in a place no one usually pays attention to. A crowded railway station full of noise, movement, and people rushing toward their destinations. But hidden in that chaos was a man whose life had frozen in time, a beggar who had forgotten how to imagine a future. People walked past him like he was a part of the station itself, a silent background piece in their busy lives. And maybe that's what hurt him the most, that no one ever looked at him long enough to wonder who he could have been. Not even he wondered, until one ordinary morning, something extraordinary happened. Imagine the scene: trains screeching, announcements echoing through the metal roof, vendors shouting prices, the smell of tea and dust in the air. And there he sat, tired, hungry, a hand stretched out like it had been for years. Then he noticed a man unlike anyone he had ever seen. Businessman dressed in a suit so sharp it almost reflected the sunlight. His watch gleamed, his shoes shined. His walk carried a confidence the beggar couldn't even name. For the first time in a long time, the beggar felt a spark of hope. This man will give me something. He rushed toward him, stretched out his hand, expecting a coin, maybe even a note. But instead, something completely unexpected happened. The businessman didn't reach into his pocket. He didn't ignore him either. He simply looked at him, really looked tanned, asked a question that sliced through the beggar's soul like a blade. You ask from everyone, but what have you ever given? The beggar froze. No one had ever asked him that. People usually gave him pity or annoyance, but never a question that demanded he think about himself. Words stumbled out of his mouth. "Sir, I'm just a beggar. I have nothing to give." The businessman shook his head gently, as if the beggar had missed something obvious, and replied, "If you believe you have nothing to give, then you also have nothing to receive. Life is an exchange, not a charity." And then he walked away, leaving the beggar standing in the middle of the platform, surrounded by noise but feeling like the entire world had suddenly gone silent. That question echoed in his mind, louder than the trains. What have you ever given? For the first time in his life, he didn't feel insulted. He felt awakened. He felt challenged. He felt something old and forgotten inside him shake awake a sense of possibility. That night he lay on his cold floor, staring at the ceiling of the station, unable to sleep. He had begged for years. He had survived on scraps. But never once had he thought about offering anything. The businessman's words replayed like a broken record. If you want to receive, you must give. But what could he give? He had nothing. No skills, no possessions, no money. Just a pair of tired hands and a bruised ego. Yet something inside him whispered, there must be something. Days passed. He didn't beg. He didn't ask. He just thought. Thought in a way he had never thought before. And on the third day, life gave him a tiny miracle, one that would change his fate forever. Near the railway tracks, hidden between the metal rails and rough stones, he spotted a bunch of wild flowers, small, fragile, but beautiful. And suddenly, like lightning striking a dry forest, an idea ignited inside him. If I cannot give money, maybe I can give beauty. Nobody had ever handed him beauty before. Nobody had ever offered him kindness. Nobody had ever given him something that made him feel seen or valued. So he decided he would become the person who gives what he never received. That day, he gently picked the flowers and returned to his spot. When someone dropped a coin into his hand, he really smiled, and offered a flower in return. And in that simple moment, something magical happened. The passerby paused, looked at him differently, and smiled back. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a beggar. He was someone offering something. And that tiny exchange a coin for a flower sparked a transformation he never expected. People started giving more. Some stopped just for a flower. Some gave money even when they didn't need a flower. Why? Because now he was giving, and people feel good when they receive something meaningful. He noticed something powerful. When his flowers ran out, the money decreased. When he had flowers, people gave generously. He had discovered the oldest rule of success long before reading any book. Value attracts value. And that realization, that awakening, that quiet spark inside him, was the beginning of a transformation so big he couldn't even imagine where it would take him. And this moment, right here, is where the real story begins. The days that followed felt unreal to the beggar, almost like he had stepped into a version of his life he never knew existed. Every morning he awoke with a strange new feeling: purpose. Not survival, not desperation, purpose. He would gently pick fresh flowers, arrange them with care, and wait for the trains to arrive. What used to be a dull, lifeless routine had now become a mission. People who used to walk past him without a second glance now slowed down, smiled, and spoke to him with warmth. Some even thanked him as if he were providing a service rather than begging. For the first time in years, he felt a quiet pride swelling inside his chest. He wasn't just that beggar at the station anymore. He was someone who created value, someone who offered something beautiful in a world full of noise. But as his days improved, one question kept haunting him. Why had that businessman helped him? Why him? Why that moment? And without even realizing it, he found himself waiting, hoping that he might see the man again, because deep inside, he wanted to show him the change. He wanted him to see the new version of the man he had awakened. Weeks passed, his routine grew stronger. People began recognizing him. Some even bought flowers before boarding trains. But the more he gave, the more he realized something profound: giving changes you first. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the self-image that was slowly being repaired. The man who once believed he had nothing to give now woke up every morning with something to offer. That shift alone was worth more than money. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the platform, the beggar's heart suddenly raced. He saw him, the businessman. Same confident walk, same sharp suit, same aura of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Without hesitation, the beggar ran toward him. Flowers clutched in his hand, excitement written all over his face. "Sir, today I have something to offer you," he said breathlessly. The businessman paused, looked at the flowers, looked at him, and his eyes softened with pride. He handed the beggar some money, took a few flowers, and said words that would echo through the man's life forever. "Today, you are no longer a beggar. Today, you are a businessman." It felt like the entire station disappeared. No sound, no people, no trains, just those words ringing in his ears. A businessman. He repeated the phrase in his mind like a sacred mantra. And then something happened inside him, a shift so deep it almost scared him. He realized he had been waiting for anyone to give him permission to change. But the truth was, he had given himself permission the moment he decided to give. That night, he didn't sleep on the station floor. He didn't lie awake feeling hopeless. He sat upright, eyes wide, mind racing. If I'm a businessman, why am I still here begging? If I can trade flowers, why can't I grow more? Why can't I buy better ones? Why can't I open a stall? Why can't I build something? It was as if a new door had opened inside his mind. A door he never knew existed. A door that only appears when you believe you deserve more. The next morning, he didn't pick wild flowers. He went into the local market. He used the money he had saved, small but meaningful, to buy the cheapest flowers he could find. At first, the shopkeeper frowned. "How can you afford anything here?" The former beggar smiled, held out his coins, and said, "I'm not buying for charity. I'm buying for business." The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose, and with that one sentence, the beggar felt his identity shifting even more. He returned to the station with better flowers, brighter, richer, more beautiful. And as he handed them out in exchange for money, something magical happened again. People paid more. They gave willingly, happily, generously. Because now, the value he was offering wasn't just a flower, it was effort, intention, care, service. As days turned into weeks, he made patterns of what people liked, at which times the station was busiest, which colors attracted the most attention. Without formal education, without business books, without mentors, he learned the oldest law of success. Value plus consistency equals growth. His earnings grew, his confidence grew, his purpose grew, but more importantly, his identity grew. He was no longer a background character in his own life. And yet, deep inside, he knew something powerful. This was only the beginning. If he could transform one part of his life, he could transform everything. And that realization would take him somewhere he never believed he could reach. Months passed, and the man who once sat silently on the cold floor of a railway station was now someone almost unrecognizable. He woke before sunrise, visited the wholesale flower market, bargained with confidence, and returned with bundles of fresh flowers that filled the morning air with color and fragrance. He no longer sat in a corner waiting for pity. He stood tall, greeting passengers with a smile, offering beautifully arranged flowers in exchange for money, and slowly building a loyal group of regular customers. People who once saw him as a beggar now approached him like he was an essential part of the Stashana, man who added beauty to their day. But success is strange. It not only changes your pockets, it changes your mind. And the man's mind was changing faster than anything else. Every night, while sitting under the dim lights of the station, he began to dream real dreams. Dreams of expanding, dreams of selling more than flowers, dreams of a stable stall, dreams of hiring people like him who had once been invisible. And one evening, after counting the day's earnings, he made a decision that shook him to his core. I will stop coming to this station as a beggar forever. Not because he didn't want to return, but because he knew the station represented who he used to be, and he was no longer that person. The next morning, he took all the money he had saved and rented a tiny wooden cart near the market. He painted it himself, placed fresh flowers neatly, and put up a small handwritten board that read, "Fresh flowers, fair price." It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect, but it was his business, his identity, his new beginning. People started buying. Some bought out of curiosity. Some bought because his smile was genuine. Some bought because his flowers looked alive in a way supermarket flowers didn't. Day by day, coin by coin, note by note, his savings grew, and slowly his cart turned into a stall. His stall turned into 2 stalls, and before he even realized it, he had built a proper shops, mall, humble, but full of life. He hired 2 helpers, both men who had once been lost, just like he was. He trained them the same way the station had trained him. Be kind, offer value, give before you ask. His small business grew into a local favorite. Brides came to buy bouquets, families came for festivities, and his flowers, once wild and free near the railway tracks, were now decorating homes, celebrations, and special moments across the town. Then one afternoon, fate brought him back to the same railway station, this time traveling for business. He wore clean clothes, carried a leather bag, and moved with a confidence that came from building himself from nothing. As he stood on the platform waiting for his train, a man beside him kept staring. A familiar face, a familiar suit, a familiar energy. It was him, the businessman, the man who asked one question that became the seed of an entire transformation. But this time the businessman didn't recognize him, not even a little, and why would he? The person standing in front of him now was not the man he had once spoken to, not the man who once stretched out his hand for coins, not the man who once believed he had nothing. So the former beggar smiled and said, "We've met before." The businessman frowned, trying to recall. And then, slowly, shock washed over his face. "Wait, you're the man from the station, the one who gave me flowers." The flower seller nodded. "Yes, but I no longer sell flowers at the station. Own a business now. I came today to buy supplies for expansion." The businessman stared at him, speechless, admiration flooding his eyes. "You've changed completely. How did you do it?" And the man who was once a beggar replied with a calm confidence only life can teach. "That day, you didn't give me money. You gave me a mirror. You made me see who I could become. I wasn't born a beggar. I just believed I was. The moment my thoughts changed, my life followed." The 2 men shook hands, not as giver and receiver, not as superior and inferior, but as equals. To businessmen, to travelers, to individuals whose paths crossed in a moment that changed everything. As the train approached, the flower seller looked back at the busy station, the same place where he once slept on cold floors and begged for survival. But now, he didn't see the old version of himself. He saw the beginning of his story, a place where one question changed his destiny, a place where he learned the greatest truth of his life. You don't become successful when life gives you more. You become successful when you realize you already have something to give. The train doors closed behind him, and as it moved away, he whispered to himself, "I was never a beggar. I just hadn't met the version of me who believed." And in that moment, you could feel that his future was blooming, just like the flowers he once traded. And the lesson he carried from that journey is the same lesson he now passes on to you. Your thoughts are the soil of your destiny. Plant something small, and you never know what might grow.